My name's Jacob Korenblum. I'm the CEO of Souktel. We are the first service in the Middle East that links young people and employers via mobile phone. And we're also the first service in the Middle East that links young people with financial information and financial service providers, also by mobile phone. What I want to do today is tell you a little bit about our story, how we, as a group of young people, came together to solve a problem in our communities and took that solution and then brought it to a global scale. I'm here today representing my colleagues who span Africa and the Middle East and North America. I myself am from Canada originally, but have been living in Palestine for the past 10 years or so. If you, as we, live in a conflict zone, this type of photo looks familiar to you. This is Beirut in 2006, at a time of upsurge in fighting there. And what always strikes me about this photo is the fact that there's a total lack of infrastructure. Roads are not functioning, electricity is not there, basic information, the ability to get basic information is totally absent. And if you're a young person, as this individual is, and you're leaving school and you're trying to get a job in an environment where the road in your neighborhood isn't even clear, you're going to be facing tremendous obstacles. And I know we've seen the Middle East in the headlines a lot in the past year, 2 years, decade, century. It seems to be a constant topic of discussion. I want to give you a bit of a contrasting image at the same time. This is the main street in Ramallah, Palestine, which is our main base of operations and where all our research and development and product design takes place. This is probably not what you think of when you hear the word Palestine. Beyond the headlines, you see a bustling commercial street. This over here is actually a cell phone kiosk, which sells airtime, handsets, and so forth. And there's a lot of economic activity that's going on in this region, despite what you read in the headlines about upheavals, insurrection, revolution, chemical warfare, and so forth. It's important to note that in these economies, jobs are being created, growth is happening. Interesting statistics indicating that in places like Egypt, for example, where we do see civil unrest, at the same time there's economic growth. Hundreds of thousands of new jobs, if not millions, being created every year, but at the same time a disconnect between the people who are looking for work and the employers who have jobs to offer. And this is a challenge we face across the region, whether we're talking about Egypt or Jordan or Iraq. Just to give you a sense, if this is not your region of specialization, where we're talking about. Some of the challenges that we face are unique, but some of them are really universal. And what we found is, as young people in the region, when we're leaving school and we're trying to look for a job, there are absolutely no resources available for us. I myself, how did I end up from Canada here and there and everywhere and over in Palestine? I went over 10 years ago to do a youth workforce assessment for a USAID project. And I'm sure many people in the room have done similar types of trips. We went over as a delegation. We were very committed, very dedicated, very diligent. We did a lot of focus groups. We did a lot of interviews. We did a desk study. We talked to people. We went to the mission. We presented to the mission director. Things were going really well in the USAID world of things. At the same time, as we were going about our business, we started realizing that the answer to the question of what young people need to succeed in the workforce was not really being addressed. It was floating out there somewhere. Young people were saying, when I leave my school, I don't have a clue as to where I can find a job. The government does not provide resources for me. They're resource constrained. I don't have internet access. I don't own a personal computer. A web cafe is expensive, and it's mainly male-dominated. At my university, there are no career centers. In my high school, less than 3% of instructional time is dedicated toward career guidance. So I am going out there in the marketplace with no idea of what awaits me. And from the employer side, we were hearing a similar thing, which is basically we need to fill positions, and you heard this morning, right? We need to fill positions, but we don't know where to find skilled talent. 800,000 jobs in Egypt last year went unfilled, despite the fact that youth unemployment is high. In South Africa, over 1 million positions open, ready for people to fill them, and employers saying, we don't have a good way of finding where talent is. So, we put our heads together and we did all of our good USAID presenting and so forth, and then we kind of said, look, we're young people. There's got to be a way that we can figure this out. We in Palestine have some very unique barriers to finding work, which do not exist in most other parts of the world. We have several hundred military checkpoints through which students such as these need to pass every day when they're going to school. Also, job seekers who are going to look for potential employment, they've got to go through the same process. And the number one way, in the absence of internet access, government resources, or career centers for finding a job, is pounding the pavement and actually going yourself in person to workplaces, giving your CV literally to an employer. And if you've got to pass through checkpoints, that's all the more difficult for you to do. It's more time consuming and it's more expensive. Now, that's a Palestine-specific thing, but if you edit out the wall that's in the background and you focus on the vehicles in the foreground, whether you're in Ramallah or in Dhaka or in Cairo or in Bogota, wherever you are, in Nairobi, this is a not uncommon sight. If you're trying to get from point A to point B, it's going to take you longer because there's lots of traffic. It's going to cost you time and it's going to cost you money. And so the question is, how do we leapfrog all of these boundaries? We've got labor demand saying, we don't know how to find good people. We've got labor supply saying, we don't even know what's out there. And then in the middle, we've got all these infrastructural challenges where people can't get from point A to point B to meet. So what seems elementary today, 10 years ago, was not necessarily so. We looked around and we said, okay, almost 100% of people, even 10 years ago, had access to cell phones. And they were using them for entertainment purposes, texting their friends, their family, hey, what are you guys doing tomorrow? I love you, I don't love you, I hate you, whatever the case is. Send me money, I need money, and so forth. This was before mobile money, so this had to be like analog money. And so we thought, okay, these are everywhere. It was not an ABC thing as it is today. We really had to put our heads together and say, okay, people are texting their loved ones, their licit or illicit loved ones, and telling them all sorts of things. Can we channel this energy into something productive, like, not that that's not productive per se, but something, let's say, more long-term productive, which is getting you a job, getting you connected to financial resources. And oh, guess what? It's also the cheapest way to communicate. So we kind of added up all of these things, the gap, the supply, the demand, and the barrier in between them, and we came together with a basic concept. And this basically said that if you have access to a very basic, simple, dumb phone, as it was referred to yesterday, although I don't love that term, because I think my basic phone is pretty smart still. You can create a profile that lists your skills as a job seeker. And you can do that through a series of back and forth text messages where you get asked, when can you work? And you text back and you indicate your availability. You get asked, what's your experience thus far? How many years of experience? And you text that back. And all of this information gets stored up in the cloud so that employers can now start to find you. And they can say, I want carpenters in the capital city who are female, who can work on the weekend. And they'll be able to hone in on a specific segment of youth. And at the same time, on the opposite side of the coin, the employers from their end can also post job ads. And they can say, look, we're looking for ABC. And job seekers can text into the service and say, I'm looking for a job in carpentry, where can I find it? And so right away, we've got supply and demand meeting each other in the middle, using a technology platform that's the most ubiquitous thing that's already out there, and that's pretty cost effective. So we launched it on a pilot basis in Palestine. This is going back 7 years ago. We were all working at other jobs full-time. This was kind of our part-time thing that we did when we had time to do it. We noticed immediately that a primary impact of the service was that it increased labor force participation among young women. In traditional societies such as the one that we live in, and I believe perhaps not uncommon to many places in the world, young women are discouraged from going outside of the home for an unscheduled appointment. A young woman cannot go and take her CV and pound the pavement and give it into an employment agency or to an employer. That's simply not accepted and it's not done. And so what happens is many women are sitting at home and they're simply sitting unemployed as a result. Once we introduced the option to submit your CV via mobile or get job information via mobile, young women were coming to us and saying, I was sitting at home for 6 weeks or more trying to find work. Now I can find a job in a week or less. I don't have to go out to an unscheduled appointment. I can just search on my phone and I can find that information. And that then creates a socially permissible way for me to go to a job interview. that's acceptable. It's an appointment that has been made. And once I'm at that job interview, I can present my credentials in a way that I wouldn't have even known how to do beforehand because I would not have been able to locate this employer. We exchange the credentials. We do all of the traditional labor market things that you or I would do. And then ultimately, if it works out, as it did in this case, I'm now employed as a TV correspondent or a TV camera operator. And so this was a real benefit that we noticed right away from the standpoint of young people, a drastic reduction in the time spent looking for work, an increase in income levels because they were able to find work that wasn't just any old job, but the jobs that were closely suited to the skills that they actually had and the things they wanted to do. And from the employer side, it was a massive reduction of time and cost spent hiring people. What would happen, and I know lots of our peer organizations in Palestine used to do this. If you wanted to hire somebody, you're putting an ad in the newspaper. It's close to $100 a day. And what you're simply saying is, we have a position open and here's our address and come drop your CVs off. So an organization that wanted to hire graphic designers was getting plumbers and carpenters coming in, giving their CVs or whatever type of credentials they had, and folks were saying, wait, this is a graphic design job. And these guys were saying, yeah, that's no problem, I can figure it out. Like, I'll change my skill set if I need to, I just want to work. And so it was a very inefficient hiring process for employers. What we did here was basically say to the employers, you tell us through this system exactly the criteria you're looking for, and we're able to hone in on the skill sets and the people that you need to get in touch with. We started doing this in Palestine. It grew from a few hundred users to tens of thousands of users. And what we then started doing was layering it into the workforce development programs that many of you all run here. So working with organizations such as the International Youth Foundation in Jordan, when they do face-to-face training, there's now a next step, which is you, once you leave the classroom or the training site, can sign up for a job information service, and you can then take that soft skill training or hard skill training into the working world. We work with Education Development Center, who came to us and said, that thing that you do in Palestine, could you do that in East Africa? And we sort of said, yeah, we can. I mean, we know the labor markets are different, but the basic principle is the same. And when we're talking about a country like Somalia, for example, or the Somali region, Somaliland, Puntland, and South Central Somalia, we've got similar types of constraints in the labor market. We've got poor infrastructure, very poor telecoms, very poor internet availability, I should say, very good telecom networks, but very poor internet access. And so we took the concept and we grew it from one market into 2 or 3 markets, and now today to a point where it's being used in some variation or another in more than 20 markets across the globe. And again, it's creating this linkage between labor supply and labor demand and layering it into the vocational training programs that you all run so that when you're not face-to-face, you've got the ability to find out about work in hospitality, which is a major sector in the Somali economy, you may not know, but tens of thousands of diaspora Somalis come home every year, and they need places to stay and places to eat. Infrastructure and construction, there's a growing need for, as the country and the region recover from decades of civil war, there's a growing need for building roads, building ports, building all that infrastructure. Young people now have a way to find out when that work is available. One thing that we did more recently and we found out was for people who cannot read, they're excluded from a text-based job information system. What if we offer this via audio in a touch-tone format? And moreover, what if we plug a cell phone handset into a speaker dock? Now we can tell people things via audio. They can listen in groups or alone, and they can access content on demand. And so we rolled out a parallel financial literacy information service that gives people information about saving, budgeting, preparing for their future, everything that's related to the world of work. We're doing that by audio with touch-tone menus that you can call into and hear pre-recorded segments. So it's no longer about what you can do in a classroom or what you can do face-to-face. It's that and much more. And I guess what I would say if I have to sort of wrap up and think about some of the key lessons that we learned in this process. Often I think young people get labeled with traits that are perceived to be typically negative. Youth are frustrated. Youth do not have a regard for authority. They're wary of people in positions of power. Youth have it easy. because they don't have responsibilities of family and so forth. And they just relax and they take it easy and they don't contribute to society. What we try to do through this experience and what we continue to do now in the work from day to day as a youth-led organization is to say, wait a minute, we've taken those traits and we've turned them on their head. So yeah, we were frustrated with the way the status quo was. So we took that and we said there's got to be a better way to create a solution. We were wary of the traditional ways of solving these problems, and so we had to think creatively and outside the box. And yes, to be fair, we didn't have the obligations of the adult leaders in our societies. We, at the time, at the start, were not yet married, we didn't have children, and so we had a lot of free time. Well, that was a good thing. We allocated that time to create a solution. And so I guess what I would encourage everyone in the room to think, and I'm sure you already know, but those very characteristics, which are often used to define us, youth, in a negative sense, are really assets. And if we have the right support and the right opportunity, there can be 50 to 60 Souktels. I don't see any reason why. And we're by no means the silver bullet. We're one example. But coming out of a region which you're seeing now in the headlines every day for one reason, let's have the headlines talk about all of the positive youth entrepreneurship that's coming out of places like the Middle East or the Democratic Republic of Congo or any country in the world. Channeling those resources with the right support, there's no reason why we can't do it. Thanks a lot.